Hello class, this is Miss Sherman. I am putting together this tutorial to go over dosage calculation worksheet. As I have been grading the worksheet, many of you have ultimately come up with the final answer to the question, but I wanted to create this tutorial because I think there's some confusion as to the simplicity of these calculations. So I'm going to just give you a worked example here, and I'll go over this entire sheet. So to begin with, I wanted you to identify the MRDs of epinephrine and levonorephrine because you need to know this. It's very simple. They are the same for every patient, whether it's a healthy patient or a cardiac patient. So a healthy patient for epinephrine is 0.2 milligrams. For a cardiac patient, it is 0.04 milligrams. That's the same for all patients. If they're contraindicated for epinephrine and levonorephrine needs to be used, then for a healthy patient, they can have 1 milligram. And if it's a cardiac patient who cannot have epinephrine, then it is 0.2 milligrams of levonorephrine. These are the same for all patients. They don't need to be individually determined vasoconstrictors. So let's begin with our first scenario. 140-pound healthy patient who will be getting 2% lidocaine plain, meaning there is no vasoconstrictor in it. Now, looking at your MRDs in table 7.1, the absolute MRD for lidocaine is 500 milligrams. Now, to determine the patient's MRD based on body weight, then it will be 3.2 times their body weight of 140 pounds, which equals 448 milligrams. So comparing these two, the absolute MRD is 500, the patient's MRD is 448. 448 is the one that you go with because it's the lowest. It's the first MRD that is met, so that's the one that you go with. So to determine how many cartridges this patient can have, 448 divided by 36, because there's 36 milligrams of anesthetic in each cartridge, equals 12.4 cartridges. Number 2, a 200-pound healthy patient will be receiving 2% lidocaine with 1 to 100,000 epinephrine. The absolute MRD for the anesthetic, which is lidocaine, is 500 milligrams. To determine the patient's MRD, we'll take 3.2 times their body weight, which gives us 640 milligrams. Now, I put the vasoconstrictor MRD here not because there was anything to calculate, but because I wanted to highlight just which vasoconstrictor MRD you were having to deal with this patient. So this is a healthy patient who can have epinephrine. So the MRD for a healthy patient on epinephrine is 0.2 milligrams. So there's nothing to calculate here. The calculation comes in with how many cartridges can this patient have. So you're going to do two calculations. You're going to calculate how many cartridges this patient can have based on anesthetic, and you're going to calculate how many cartridges this patient can have based on vasoconstrictor. So let's do those two. Let's start with anesthetic first. Now we have two MRDs, and we have to take the lowest one. So the absolute MRD is 500 milligrams for the anesthetic. His body weight is 640. So the lowest one is 500 milligrams. That's the one that we're going to use. 500 divided by 36 milligrams in each cartridge equals 13.8 cartridges. Based on vasoconstrictor, 0.2 is the MRD. There is 0.018 milligrams of vasoconstrictor in each cartridge. So that equals 11.11 cartridges. So comparing these two, the vasoconstrictor is the limiting factor at 11 cartridges. Let's go down to number 3. We have a 110-pound patient at 4% articaine with 1 to 100,000 epinephrine. This is articaine, so the absolute MRD for articaine, there isn't any. The patient's MRD for articaine, we will again be using 3.2 times their body weight, which will equal 352 milligrams. The vasoconstrictor that we're using here again is epinephrine. This is a healthy patient, so it's 0.2. Now again, we'll do two calculations, one for articaine and one for epinephrine. So to do that calculation for anesthetic, 352 is their MRD. Divide that by 72, which is how many milligrams is in 4% anesthetic. And you come up with 4.8 cartridges. For the vasoconstrictor, 0.2 divided by 0.018. If you remember from the last calculation, that's 11.11 cartridges. So in this case, the anesthetic is the limiting factor at 4.8 cartridges. Now, for this last scenario, a 170-pound cardiac patient has already received one carpule of 2% carbocaine with 1 to 20,000 levonorephrine. So the absolute MRD for carbocaine, which is mepivacaine, is 400 milligrams. Let's calculate the patient's MRD. 3.0 times their weight equals 510 milligrams. Now we can see here the anesthetic MRD is the one that you have to go by. Okay, so not this one. Now, vasoconstrictor. Let's calculate for that. This is where we now have levonorephrine, and it's a cardiac patient. So the MRD for that, back at the top of the page, is 0.2 milligrams. Okay, just keeping that in mind. Not that there's anything to calculate here. Let's begin the calculations. One for anesthetic and one for vaso. Okay, anesthetic, we're using the 400. We're going to divide that by 36 milligrams because that's how many milligrams are in a cartridge of 2% solution. And that comes to 11 cartridges. For vasoconstrictor, 0.2 divided by 0.09, which is the amount of vasoconstrictor in a 1 to 20,000 carpule of anesthetic, which equals 2.2 cartridges. So, to answer the question, the person has already received one cartridge. So, this one minus 1, that would equal 10 cartridges. This one equals 1.22 cartridges. So we can see here that the vasoconstrictor is the limiting factor and they can have one additional cartridge. So I hope this cleared some things up. and made calculating a little bit simpler for you. And again, if you have any further questions, please shoot me an email.